hi there, folks. My name is Dara Star Tucker, and this is The Breakdown. I want to thank you for tuning in this week to The Breakdown on KJLH, where we sit down, we take our time, and we talk about the issues that matter. You can find me on Instagram at Dara Tucker B. That's my personal page. I am constantly leaving all sorts of content around the election because, of course, that's what we are entrenched in right now. But my regular content has to do with a lot of history and culture, contextualizing some of the issues that we face around race and all kinds of other topics. So if you want to stay in touch with me, Dara Star Tucker online, you can find me on Instagram at Dara Tucker B. On all other platforms, you can find me at Dara Star Tucker. That's Dara with one R and Star with two. You can also find me on the KJLH Instagram page. That is Radio Free KJLH, and they're posting about all kinds of community events. Of course, they're keeping you up to date with current events and with political topics as well, social, cultural topics. It's always a good thing to stay plugged in with KJLH on Instagram. You can find them at Radio Free KJLH. What I want to get into this week with The Breakdown is a discussion of last week's events around the debate. Now, I don't know if you're someone who likes to plug into such things. I will have to be honest and say that I was a little reticent to plug into the debate. I work with a couple of nonprofits, and I work with getting messaging out there and info out there around politics and making sure that we're getting correct and accurate information out there, doing some myth busting and things like that. So I was required through working with those partners to watch the debate and to create some content around just bringing clarity to some things that were said during the debate. But if I had not been contracted to actually create content around the debate, I probably would not have watched myself. And that's because I'm just not a fan of the sport of it. It all makes me really uncomfortable. It's the same reason I don't watch football games. I don't watch basketball games. It's just too tense for me. I want to see the highlight reel, tell me about what happened, but I don't need to be right there witnessing the play-by-play. I really don't. And then on top of that, just to be frank, honestly, the sound of Donald Trump's voice just gives me the heebie-jeebies. The sight of him, the idea of him being able to be put side by side with someone as competent and as knowledgeable and as experienced as Kamala Harris, the idea of him being put up side by side with her, I don't know. I just find it reprehensible. I find it repugnant that we should have to consider these two people in the same context for the same job as though they are anywhere on similar playing fields. It makes no sense to me. And so I really would have avoided it, except that I had to watch it for my jobs. And I'm kind of glad that I did. It was kind of a moment in history. It was really, for lack of a better way of evaluating it, it was good television. If you just really want to bring it down to brass tacks, I'm sure that ABC News is quite pleased. The viewership was really high for this thing, as far as I know. But I think the moderators did a really good job of keeping Trump's BS under control. I felt like they did a really good job staying out of the way and not making themselves the main focus of the night. But they kept things on track. What I did not like is that they kind of allowed Trump to speak over and over again, even when his mic was muted. There was this whole debate before the debate started about whether or not the mics were going to be muted. And they finally agreed that if the person was not speaking, i.e. if Trump was not speaking, that we would not have to hear from him. So as far as I could tell, he didn't really interrupt Kamala Harris, but he definitely came back with his retorts at times that he was really not supposed to be speaking. After she finished speaking and it really was not time for him to respond again, they were supposed to go on to the next question. He definitely came back and talked again, and they would just turn his mic right back on, which really frustrated me. And I would be interested to see kind of a breakdown in terms of the time that each candidate was allowed to talk, because if I was viewing things correctly, they gave Trump a whole lot more time to come back and create another response to a response that he was not supposed to be responding to. I felt like they really just let him drone on, and they gave him much more time to be heard than Kamala Harris. Now, you all have probably seen all of the memes. You've heard all of the quotables, all of the really wacky moments that happened during this debate. I thought, all in all, that Kamala Harris handled herself really well, considering who her opponent was. As seriously as you can take something like that, considering Donald Trump himself and just what an unserious person he is. I think Kamala Harris did a really good job of creating a narrative that said, hey, this is who I am. This is what my vision is for America. This is what my vision is for the future. She did a really good job of making sure that the focus was on the American people. I thought that that was really what her job was to do, was first of all to introduce herself, and it was to make sure that people understood where the focus was going to be in terms of her presidency. And I felt like Donald Trump did what Donald Trump always does. He put the focus on himself, first of all, and then he put the focus on illegal immigration. Not only illegal immigration as a fact, but undocumented immigrants as being a threat, as being criminals, as being violent. And this whole idea of, we saw the signs being waved at the Republican National Convention, mass deportations now, this fervor around illegal immigration and really vilifying people who are in this country illegally, vilifying them as being responsible for all of the ills that plague this country. That rhetoric is being churned up to a degree that I have never seen before in my lifetime. I know we have never seen that before in recent politics, period. So I think for a lot of us, it's been really eye-opening to kind of observe where things have even ratcheted up to in the last year or so, because Trump is leaning on this message more and more heavily, and they are pretty much running on a message of combating illegal immigration. Get all of the illegals out, as horrible as it sounds. And Kamala Harris predicted it from the very beginning. If you go back and watch her opening statements, she told you that is what he was going to do. She called it from the very beginning. She said Trump is going to bring this down to illegal immigration, and he's going to throw that out there as the answer to everything. No matter what is being discussed, what's being talked about, he's going to make it about illegal immigrants. And that is exactly what he did. And I really find it very interesting. I'm going to play for you a video that I did in response to all of this, just some off-the-cuff thoughts that I had after watching some of the punditry and the commentary around this debate. A video that I made about some thoughts that I had about how this was evaluated, just how the dynamics between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump were evaluated, particularly by conservative commentators, but even by some more liberal commentators. And I took issue with how some of the stuff was being framed. So I'm going to play that for you now, and then I'll be back to make some further commentary on that.
Do you know what pisses me off? Do you know what really pisses me off listening to this debate analysis? You got these pundits who want to act like Kamala Harris threw Trump off his game. Oh, she baited him. Oh, yeah, she threw out the bait and he took it. She sidetracked him. She sidelined him. She got him ranting. Oh, my God. She got him rambling about immigrants. Oh, for shame. As though that isn't what he always does. Are you kidding me? She called it from the very beginning. She said what he is going to do is he is going to rant about immigration, illegal immigration, when that isn't even the point. That isn't even what's being discussed. Every opportunity that he got, he brought it back to illegal immigration and vilifying these people as being the scourge of our nation. If it was about the economy, mass deportations, that's what it's all about. That's going to fix the economy. No matter what was being talked about, it was about the illegal immigrants. But these folks want to act like it was Kamala Harris's fault. It was this conniving, sneaky, manipulative. Oh, she was shrewd. She was clever. And the way, did you see the way she threw him off his game? As though he was ever on his game. As though this is not exactly who he is. This is who he is. This is what he does. How is this Kamala Harris's fault? How was his disastrous performance Kamala Harris's fault? Please explain. It's like all the Republicans are now embarrassed because their senile grandfather came doddering out of the back room in like a t-shirt and no pants. And now the company has seen him like this and they're trying to explain him away. But no, you know that your granddad is senile. He'd been senile for years. You just didn't want the company to see it. They're used to seeing him dressed up in church just for a few minutes. Oh, hi, Mr. Walker. That's all they ever see. But then they came over your house and he came out of the back room looking like he always looks. This is him. He has always been this. And it's gotten worse, and you know it, for all the questions they wanted to raise about how much worse Joe Biden had gotten over the years and who was protecting him, who was covering this up. Did Kamala Harris know that Joe Biden had gotten to the point where he could no longer serve? They need to be asked the same questions. Who's protecting Trump? Who are these people that are making sure that folks don't see him for exactly who he is? This is who he is. He is not well. He has not been well in a long time. And he is xenophobic. He is racist. She didn't trick him. She didn't bring something out of him that's never been seen before. He talks about this stuff literally every day on the campaign trail. This is who he is.
So there was this whole idea of Kamala Harris supposedly throwing Donald Trump off of his game. Oh my God, this evil, this wicked woman. She was sinister, she was sly, she was cunning, and she threw Trump off of his game. And he had been coached and he had been trained by Tulsi Gabbard, of all people, and others as to how he was going to come in here like a boxer and just be ready to punch back and stay on message and stay focused. As if Donald Trump has ever done that a day in his life. Certainly not in the 8 years or so that he has been out there in the political arena. Has Donald Trump ever been a focused candidate? Has he ever presented a focused message that any of us have ever known about? Of course not. And it was just so interesting how he started out the debate and his tone was very subdued. It was very much down here. And then slowly but surely, he just started to ratchet up and he started to get into that tone that everybody knows. And he just started railing about the illegal immigrants eating dogs and cats. And he went back into his greatest hits because that's all he can do, which really speaks to the fact that Donald Trump really doesn't know how to do anything other than appeal to his base. He really only knows how to speak to the people who already get down with him. He does not know how to do any reach out whatsoever. And so what Republicans are essentially counting on right now is that there will be enough people that just take this messaging around Democrats being very scary. And we'll get into some of the misinformation in just a minute. But they'll take some of this misinformation. They'll take the fact that she's a woman. They'll take the fact that she is a woman of color. And they'll be just scared enough of that, along with the misinformation that's being put out there. And they will run from her. And that the only place they will have to go will be Trump. There are many operatives within the Republican Party and within the media, Fox News and Newsmax and other places, that are counting on the fact that a lot of people will just shy away from the idea of voting for a Kamala Harris because she is not a man and because she's not white and because of all the other misinformation that's being put out there. And so really what they need him to do at this point is just stay out of the way. They're hoping that she makes some sort of giant mistake. They're hoping that something trips her up at some point and that people will become more averse to her because Donald Trump is a known entity. It's not like they're just getting to know Donald Trump. They know what they get with Donald Trump. But they're hoping that Kamala Harris will do or say something that will cause the American people to lose faith in her. And that did not happen at last week's debate. And a lot of Republicans are really upset about it now. Donald Trump came out and showed his true colors. What he did there in terms of ranting about immigrants and spreading all of these ridiculous lies, it was nothing that was out of the ordinary for him. This was par for the course for him. And what he could not do was discipline himself enough to hide those parts of himself. As I said, he's the bumbling grandfather or uncle that sits in the back room all day and watches as the world turns and comes out of the room every once in a while with no pants on. And he's been that for a while. And they were just hoping to hide some of the crazy. And it just didn't work. So now there's this whole campaign to kind of blame all of that on Kamala Harris. She baited him. She threw him off of his game. You know, this wicked, evil woman, that's what they do. She confused old grandpa. Yeah, she probably did. She threw him off. And it was just very interesting to see the moment. And if you have not watched these clips, I would encourage you, if you'd like a little bit of free entertainment, to go back and watch the clip where she starts to talk about his crowd size. Now, I will concede that was the moment where things did turn. That was the moment. If you want to say that Kamala Harris, quote unquote, baited Trump, that's the moment where you could get away with saying, yeah, she threw something out there at him that he might not have actually talked about, but she wanted to make sure and get just a little vignette of Donald Trump ranting about crowd size. I'm going to play that clip for you now.
And I'm going to actually do something really unusual, and I'm going to invite you to attend one of Donald Trump's rallies, because it's a really interesting thing to watch. You will see during the course of his rallies, he talks about fictional characters like Hannibal Lecter. He will talk about windmills cause cancer. And what you will also notice is that people start leaving his rallies early out of exhaustion and boredom. And I will tell you, the one thing you will not hear him talk about is you. You will not hear him talk about your needs, your dreams, and your desires. And I'll tell you, I believe you deserve a president who actually puts you first, and I pledge to you that I will.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump, on that point, I want to get your response.
Well, I would like to respond.
Let me just ask, though, why did you try to kill that bill, and successfully so? That would have put thousands of additional agents and officers on the border.
First, let me respond as to the rallies. She said people start leaving. People don't go to her rallies. There's no reason to go. And the people that do go, she's bussing them in and paying them to be there, and then showing them in a different light. So she can't talk about that. People don't leave my rallies. We have the biggest rallies, the most incredible rallies in the history of politics.
If you want to say that Kamala Harris baited Donald Trump, at least that one moment she did score, and then the expression on her face where she's just sort of sitting back with her hand on her chin with this smirk on her face, having accomplished exactly what she set out to accomplish. Now, that moment was sweet. I will give you that. But other than that, I think what we saw was just Trump being himself. And that moment was a bit of a pivot when she threw him off in that way with the crowd size comment. He was really not able to gain his focus after that. But again, Donald Trump has never been a focused candidate. So let's put the blame where it should lie. For the most part, 90% of what came out of that man's mouth was going to come out of his mouth anyway, regardless of what Kamala Harris did or did not say. So now you have a lot of Republican folks online, a lot of conservatives who are very upset about the outcome of this election, especially since Trump scored a slam dunk against someone who was barely there, frankly, in the first debate, in Joe Biden. That was really hard to watch. But I think they were hoping for a similar situation, and they were ready to see him just go toe-to-toe with Kamala Harris. This woman she's a litigator. So I don't know why they would think that she would not be able to handle herself properly in a situation like that. But now we're starting to see all sorts of complaints arise that this was just slanted against Trump. They were all in the tank for Kamala Harris, and they were ready to just prop her up. And this was unfair, and it was biased against Trump because Trump was being live fact-checked on a few very egregious lies that he put out there. And the idea that him talking about immigrants eating cats and dogs.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating.
And Democrats supposedly allowing abortions after birth.
Her vice presidential pick says abortion in the 9th month is absolutely fine. He also says execution after birth. It's execution, no longer abortion, because the baby is born, is okay. And that's not okay with me.
And transgender surgeries on illegal aliens who are in jail.
Now she wants to do transgender operations on illegal aliens that are in prison. This is a radical left liberal that would do this. She wants to confiscate your guns, and she will never allow fracking in Pennsylvania.
The idea that they were just supposed to let all of that slide and just let him do what he does in front of his hometown crowds when he goes to Paducah, Kentucky, and gets all the cheers from the people who don't question him. The idea that those ABC moderators, those journalists, were supposed to let those moments slide is utterly ridiculous. And as far as I know, the CNN moderators, Jake Tapper and Dana Bash, they let him get away with that stuff. And it was very frustrating. And of course, Biden was in no mental shape to be able to push back against much of it at all. He was very slow. He was not really very responsive. He could barely even get out what he wanted to say, let alone combat the foolishness that were coming out of Trump's mouth. So Trump got away with a lot in the first debate. For these people who really are fully plugged in to the conservative pipeline, who are watching Fox News, who are listening to Alex Jones and participating in whatever other parts of the alt-right bubble that they're participating in, they don't really hear their hero criticized very much at all. And if you're watching Fox News, he's protected in every possible way on Fox News. So it is a very unusual thing for them to see their hero being called out for his absolute foolery in the moment. And I'm so glad that they did it. And as far as I can tell, they really only called out his most egregious lies, because he could have been fact-checked over 50 other things. And of course, all of those lists and those articles are coming out fact-checking what he said and what she said. Kamala Harris spewed some stuff that was not entirely truthful as well. If I have a criticism of her camp, it's that I think they need to tighten up their messaging a bit, because I've heard them, even in commercials, laying the blame for Project 2025 on Trump. Yes, we know that 140 of his staffers are involved with writing Project 2025, but I think they need to stop calling it Donald Trump's Project 2025, because it just sounds like they are putting this out there as being something that is factual when it isn't necessarily factual. He has skirted around it and tried to convince us that this is not really coming from him, when we know that it is coming from his people and that he has every intention of implementing it. But to say that it is Trump's project, it is his manifesto, is technically not correct. And so they can always call her out on that. So I think her camp can do a better job with messaging and tightening up kind of the ways that they are presenting some of this information. And yes, I do feel like Kamala Harris got away with not being entirely straightforward when they asked her particularly about fracking and an assault weapons ban. There were a few things that they asked her about directly that she didn't answer. Hey, why have you changed your position on this thing? And she did not answer that directly. I feel like there's a really very straightforward way that you can say, hey, if you have this information on Monday and you get some different information on Tuesday, then it is okay to change your mind on Wednesday and have a different position. And that's okay. All politicians change their position on certain issues depending on what is expedient, depending on more information that they gather, for all kinds of reasons, and that's okay. So I did feel like she skirted that kind of thing just a little bit. And if they have a second debate, maybe she'll address some of that. I frankly am hoping that they don't do a second debate, because I don't need to see one. I think she did as well as can be expected. And I hope that they don't feel that they have to go down this path again, because honestly, I don't really feel like these debates shift the needle much at all. It's just good entertainment. But in addition to being upset about the live fact-checking that the moderators were conducting on Trump specifically for these horribly egregious lies, the conservative pundits and TikTokers and Instagrammers and YouTubers are now all upset because they claim that Kamala Harris was wearing a pair of earrings from Tiffany's that supposedly were feeding her information. These were actually earpieces, according to them. You could not make this stuff up. And a lot of folks are out here actually buying this stuff. Apparently, the earrings that Kamala Harris was wearing, according to these conservative commentators, the earrings she was wearing were actually earpieces that were feeding her the information that she needed for that night. And of course, by their evaluation, this messaging was really coming from a white man somewhere, because there's absolutely no way that a woman of color could have had the sense to be able to communicate and to box toe to toe with Trump in the way that she did so competently and knock that man out flat on his face in the way that she did. Oh no, there's no way that a woman can do this, even though she's been a district attorney. She spent half her life in a courtroom. She has been an attorney general. She's been a senator. And she's now the vice president of the United States. But no, she needs a pair of Tiffany earrings feeding her information from someone else in order for her to handle herself competently in a debate. It's utterly ridiculous. And there's just no extent that these people won't go to try and defend their hero. They also claim that she received the questions in advance. And of course, Donald Trump is leading the way with all of this messaging coming out from his Truth Social. I don't know if he's using Twitter/X anymore, but he's on Truth Social making all of these claims that Kamala Harris supposedly received the questions in advance, that the moderators were there to help her, that it was 3 against 1. That's the line that a lot of them were using, which is absolutely hilarious to me. But I want to point out one of the moments that I think, and as I said, Donald Trump just could not get away from this message of immigrants, illegal immigration, undocumented migrants, and what a danger that they supposedly are to our society. And I think we've all enjoyed the memes about the cats and who's eating the cats and all of this stuff. But it's important to remember that underneath all of that are human beings. There are people who are being vilified. And he pointed to 2 specific communities one of them being Springfield, Ohio, where there is a pretty large community of Haitian immigrants that have now settled there. And his claims during the debate were that they were consuming cats and dogs. And oh, I've seen this on television. Thankfully, David Muir pushed back on that in the moment and told him, we've talked to the city manager or whoever the official was, and he has said that there are no credible reports of this happening. And of course, in that moment, Trump just pushed back and said it was something that he saw, something that he heard. He doesn't really care if it's true or not. But you could hear him, the excitement in his voice, when he finally got to yell into the microphone that they were eating cats and eating dogs. It was just so over the top, so utterly ridiculous. But now on the back end, there's absolute chaos that is exploding there in Springfield, Ohio. Those Haitian immigrants are now being targeted. I heard today that there was a bomb threat at City Hall in Springfield, Ohio, because these cult members really is what they are of Donald Trump's. They will stop at nothing to be able to protect him, to bolster his lies and his disinformation. And this stuff is not just kiki funny. The memes are funny, and I've received a bunch of them. But underneath it all, there are people whose lives are being affected and they are being harmed by this deliberate disinformation campaign. And this is just the latest boogeyman that Donald Trump and many others have thrown out there to make people think that they have to offer their unquestioned support to Republicans who want to conduct these mass deportations, which, by the way, they haven't even spelled out exactly how they are going to go about this. That is a very complicated process and is going to lead to the violation of a whole lot of civil liberties. But of course, they don't want to get into the details of exactly how that is going to work. But I want to play you a video that I did on this subject, the idea of this migrant crime wave. Is this a real thing? And what are the dangers of putting this kind of disinformation out there? I'm going to play that for you, and then I'll be right back to give you my final thoughts on the debate. Okay, my vote for the most absolutely unhinged moment of the debate.
They're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets.
That moment will live in infamy. It's hard sometimes to believe that a certain portion of the population actually buys into that kind of over-the-top nonsense. But what you'll never hear with those folks pushing the narrative around a so-called migrant crime wave is that it is actually non-existent. Yeah, it does not exist. But of course, they didn't have the time to do a full-on fact check of all this nonsense at the debate, so I'll do it now. Statistically, immigrants don't commit crime at a higher level than non-immigrants, documented or undocumented. In fact, one study found that undocumented immigrants are 33% less likely to commit crimes than the rest of the population. So why does rhetoric like this catch on with so many people?
They are taking over the towns. They're taking over buildings. They're going in violently. These are the people that she and Biden led into our country, and they're destroying our country. They're dangerous. They're at the highest level of criminality, and we have to get them out. We have to get them out fast.
Because scapegoating is unfortunately a very effective tool during a political season. Manufacture a crime wave, don't encourage anyone to look up statistics around whether or not what you're saying is true, and give your followers a boogeyman to point the finger at, a made-up common enemy distorted to represent an existential threat to their very existence. This playbook is not new. There's a huge gap between perception and reality, specifically with regard to crime. In the last 25 years, crime has fallen to nearly half of what it was in the US. But if you survey people year over year, they consistently say that it's gone up. And why is that? Maybe because it serves politicians to keep feeding people that message so that they can run on those tough on crime ideas, things that sound tough but don't actually make us safer. Get people so afraid that they forget to hold politicians accountable for not advancing real safety solutions. But it's important to challenge this misconception when you hear it. When someone repeats talking points about crime supposedly being out of control nationally, ask them to back it up. Chances are they'll be surprised when they look up the actual data around crime and safety, including how ineffective and harmful tough-on-crime policies actually are. So even though we got lots of quotables, lots of memorable moments, I think it's important to remember that underneath all of this entertainment and all of this memifying of the debate, there are real issues at play. There are real issues at stake. And I think Kamala Harris, despite the fact that she was debating someone who is difficult to take seriously for a lot of us, I think she did a really good job with staying on message herself, with explaining to the voters what the dangers would be of another Trump presidency. And I think she did a really good job making herself look very presidential. I think she did the impossible. I was actually a little bit pessimistic beforehand. If you look at some of the threads, if you're not on Threads, you should be on Threads. I'm Dara Tucker B over there. But if you look at some of the messaging that even I was putting out before the debate happened, I was not really very hopeful that anything positive would come out of this. You know the old saying, be careful when you get into the mud with a pig, because you're going to both come out with mud all over yourselves, but one of you is going to enjoy it. And that was my feeling going into the debate. Donald Trump is going to enjoy this opportunity to throw rocks at Kamala Harris, to have his say in front of the American people, in front of a very large audience that he normally would not have. And he's going to come away just having thrown out the crazy that he always throws out there, and Kamala Harris's message would be obscured by all of Donald Trump's crazy. I don't think it really turned out that way. I think she actually was able to cut through a lot of the silliness, which you have to commend her for. That is all on her. No one else can take the credit for that, and no one else can take the blame for how ridiculous Donald Trump ended up looking. So we're going to stop claiming that Kamala Harris was the one that led him down this thorny path. Donald Trump did that to himself. And I think the moderators did a really good job of helping to cap some of the more ridiculous statements that he was making. I thought they did really well with that. And I think those criticisms of the people that are coming for them are really just sour grapes from a whole lot of conservatives that are not used to seeing their hero be challenged. As I said, I don't think that there is a lot of benefit to these debates. But I think if there was a small benefit, that Kamala Harris will see it. We will have to see how the polls look after this. I've already seen a couple that look pretty promising, that she actually may get a bit of a bump out of this just because it went so well. Now, do I think a second debate is necessary? Do I think a second debate is going to bump her up in the polls any further? I don't know that it will. And I think Donald Trump's poll numbers, as far as we can tell, his poll numbers tend to be pretty level. He doesn't really go up or go down, meaning the people that are going to support him, they are there for him. They are not going anywhere. She's not really pulling a lot of Trump supporters. What she's looking to pull are people who are undecided, and she's looking to pull the moderate voters who are never Trumpers. So Kamala Harris is the one that still needs to gain ground. I'm still not liking how close these poll numbers are, even with everything that she's done to show that she is a viable alternative to him. We've had people like Liz Cheney, Adam Kissinger, and Dick Cheney coming out supporting her, as well as the Lincoln Project. Republicans for Nikki Haley are coming out and saying she is the alternative. So Kamala Harris has everything to prove right now. And I don't think Donald Trump is going to be served by another debate. So I hope he passes on it. I really do. And I really can't get my head around why the Harris campaign would be pushing for a second debate. I think they need to take the win and just move on, okay? Put it in your pocket and then get out and continue to talk to American audiences. Go on Hot Ones. A lot of folks are suggesting that she go on this really popular podcast called Hot Ones. Have real conversations in the online space where there are actually many more eyeballs than there are on television these days. I don't think a second debate is really going to serve anyone, but I think there are a lot more opportunities that she can create and that she can seize upon that allow us to see her for who she really is, that allow us to see her humanity. There are so many of those opportunities that exist now in the social media space. So I hope her team takes full advantage of that, okay? Kamala Harris's team, if you are listening, that is my recommendation. Jump on the social media train. Find the folks who are doing things at a high level on social media and allow them to help you tell the audience your story, because they can help you do that much better than a second debate can. Well, I'd like to thank you all so much for joining me for this debate recap here on The Breakdown. If you want to hear more of my thoughts on the debate, on political issues that are happening right now, day to day, week to week, you can always find me on Instagram at Dara Tucker B. I'm on Threads at Dara Tucker B as well. Everywhere else, I'm at Dara Star Tucker. That's Dara with one R and Star with two. You can find me on the KJLH Instagram page at Radio Free KJLH. I'm looking forward to talking to you all next week, where I hope to bring you an interview with one of my mutuals who is really plugged into the political scene right now. Make sure that you're registered to vote. I say that every week, but we're getting down to the wire now because early voting is starting in just a few weeks in a whole lot of places. So make sure that your voter registration is in order. Go to vote.org/DARA to make sure that your registration is in order. Thank you for joining me here this week on The Breakdown. I look forward to talking to you all again next week. And until then, let's learn to shout.